The Azerbaijan Grandprix have never had a repeat winner since its introduction in 2016. The same trend continued this year as Max Verstappen came out on top with his teammate Sergio Perez in P2. George Russell took advantage of Ferrari's disaster and finished on the podium for the third time this season. Formula One's visit to Baku never disappoints. However, this year's race included a major blow for Ferrari with a double DNF, while Red Bull took away the maximum points available. Red Bull now leads the championship by 80 points ahead of Ferrari. After every race I will try to rate each driver's weekend out of 10. My verdict will be based on each driver's qualifying and the race performance. Here's my full driver ratings of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Max Verstappen. Max struggled against his teammate in qualifying, especially in the middle sector. He caused some tiny mistakes which costed Max P2 in Q3. But on race day he pressured Charles for P2 right after lap 1 until the first virtual safety car. Then he easily caught and passed Sergio Perez on lap 15 to take the lead of the race. Max kept his tires in better condition than his teammate throughout the race, which allowed him to pull away from Perez, and he claimed his 5th win of the season. 21-point lead for Max in the championship and a 5th win of the season gives him 9 out of 10. Sergio Perez. Sergio Perez looked to have the edge on Max throughout the practice sessions and qualifying. He delivered a great performance by beating Max in qualifying to start in P2. Sergio Perez got a brilliant start at the race which took him in the lead, but he had no answer to his teammate's pace. He gradually fell back from his teammate before pitting for the second time. Max was simply too fast in the race. Overall, Sergio got an easy P2 finish and up to second in the championship ahead of Charles, so this gives him 8 out of 10. George Russell. George Russell qualified in P5, best of the rest behind the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. And in the race George ran in P5 until both Ferraris' retirements, which gave him his 3rd podium of the year comfortably ahead of Gasly and Lewis. Another consistent drive from George, maximizing the points and taking advantage of any retirement further up. Russell took the best possible result, which gives him 8.5 out of 10. Lewis Hamilton was beaten by Pierre Gasly and his teammate George Russell in qualifying. But in the race he pitted under both the virtual safety cars, which allowed him to pass Vettel, Ricciardo and Gasly for a decent P4 finish despite complaining of back pain during the race. Lewis struggling with harsh bouncing on his car and getting P4 in the end gives him 8 out of 10. Strong qualifying for Gasly in P6, out qualifying his teammate and Lewis Hamilton. In the race he held his position until his first and only pit stop, but later in the race was overtaken by Lewis Hamilton for P4. Overall, a much improved weekend for Gasly, finishing P5 to secure his best finish of the season and much needful points for the team. Sebastian Vettel. Vettel comfortably made it into Q3, got a P9 finish in qualifying. In the race Vettel was P8 until his first and only pit stop. He tried to pass Ocon in turn 3 but missed his braking point and took the escape road. Despite this mistake he still managed to finish P6 in the end, and a best finish for Aston Martin this year. The 4-time world champion picked up good points for his team. Fernando Alonso made it into Q3 and got P10 in qualifying, but the car looked to have much more pace. Probably a tow could have helped him to grab P8. In the race he didn't pit under the virtual safety car and instead pitted on lap 18. Later during the race the McLaren couldn't able to overtake him due to his straight line speed, which gave him an advantage over the others in the midfield. Overall he got decent points for his team, which gives him 7 out of 10. Daniel Ricciardo rating 6.5. Daniel Ricciardo couldn't able to get into Q3 because of the low straight line speed of the McLaren. But in the race he was much closer to Lando and managed his tires well to pit when the second virtual safety car came out later in the race. In the last few laps he couldn't overtake Alonso due to the lack of top speed. Overall he showed great pace on Sunday and finished ahead of his teammate Lando Norris, which gives him 6.5 out of 10. Lando Norris had the pace to go into Q3, but the lack of McLaren's top speed made it difficult. He qualified P11 ahead of his teammate in P12. In the race he stayed ahead of his teammate and eventually pitted, which made him come out in traffic. The second virtual safety car helped Ricciardo to pit and stay ahead. During the last laps of the race he was ordered to stay behind Daniel. Overall decent weekend for Lando Norris and a bit unlucky in the race by the virtual safety car. This gives him 6 out of 10. Esteban Ocon was eliminated in Q2 due to yellow flags on his last run, which is why he started P13. On Sunday Ocon started on hard tyres and was P13 until the first virtual safety car. He went long on his tyres and pitted under the second virtual safety car, rejoining in 11th. Due to Yuki's late pit stop, Esteban was promoted to P10, giving him 1 point for the race. His race pace was slow during the race and many dry overtook him, however he was comfortably clear of Bottas in P11. This gives him 5.5 out of 10. Valtteri struggled to extract grip from his tyres and constantly locked up through the weekend. He managed to get into Q2 but couldn't improve on his P15 time due to a yellow flag, which ruined his final lap. In the race Valtteri started on hards and pitted only once during the second virtual safety car, but that still put him P11, long way off Esteban Ocon in P10. Overall it was tough weekend for Alfa Romeo, and Valtteri believing something was wrong with the car. This gives him only 4.5 out of 10 for this weekend. Alex Albon was down on his first run during Q1 when Fernando Alonso in front of him used the escape rope. Slipstream in from could have helped him to improve his time, but he qualified only P17. In the race Albon was fast with the Williams, but having pitted on lap 9 under the first virtual safety car, and then again pitting 4 laps before the second virtual safety car made him lose a place to Bottas for P11. Overall a good weekend for Albon and just missing points on the board. This gives him 5 out of 10. In qualifying Yuki suffered a lock-up and used the escape road on his final run in Q2, but he still managed to scrape into Q3. In the race he lost position to Sebastian, and then pitted under the first virtual safety car, but later in the race Yuki suffered a strange failure which made him pit again for repairs. This dropped him to P13 in the race. Overall a good weekend for Yuki, but his failure ruined his points finish. This gives him 6 out of 10. Mick's first run in Q1 was messy. He couldn't improve because of traffic due to the red flag for Lance Stroll. In the race Schumacher was in last place but got ahead of Nicholas due to his penalty. He pitted twice in the race but fell back due to rear tyre wear. Overall it was a bad weekend for Mick as he qualified P20 and had no pace in the race. That gives him only 3 points out of 10. In qualifying his first run only counted due to Lance Stroll's red flag. The second run in Q1 was ruined by traffic. He got pushed back on his grid spot by his mechanic just before the formation lap, which led him to a stop-go penalty. With no safety cars meant he could not recover and ultimately finished last behind Mick. His penalty destroyed his race. This gives him only 4 out of 10. Lance Stroll had a disastrous qualifying as in Q1 he hit the barriers twice. First at turn 7 then in turn 2, which brought out the red flag. In the race he started on hards and pitted on lap 30 to take the medium tyres, just few laps before second virtual safety car. Nonetheless he was out of touch with the points and was P14 when car developed vibration, which made him to retire just 2 laps before the flag. Overall his weekend was a disaster, as he was outpaced by his teammate by a long margin and Stroll crashed multiple times. This gives him only 2.5 out of 10. After the red flag in qualifying, Kevin had traffic on his second run, which meant he wasn't able to improve to get of Q1. In the race he dropped P18, but after the first virtual safety car he climbed back to P15. At the time he was behind Esteban, but Kevin had to retire because of a failure in the power unit, denying him of a possible points finish. Overall he was unlucky in both qualifying and the race. If his reliability problem didn't occur he could be P10. This gives him 5 out of 10. Zhou was in top 10 in Q1 due to a tow but ultimately qualified in P14 due to yellow flags on his last run. He out-qualified his teammate for the first time. In the race Zhou was with Vettel and on the same strategy, but a cooling problem forced him to retire the car. His car reliability problem costed him good points finish, possibly a P8 finish, which gives him 6 points out of 10. In qualifying Charles pulled a special lap out of the bag-grabbing pole position. In the race Charles had a bad launch of the grid which made him lose a place to Perez at turn 1. However he held off Max's charge early in the race for P2. but he decided to pit in the first virtual safety car on lap 9. After the first stops, Charles led the race by 13 seconds on old hards tyres, until his Ferrari power unit blew up. Overall, a very strong qualifying session for Charles, and his car reliability problem costed him a win, or at least a podium. Third consecutive time Ferrari has costed Charles a win. This gives him 8 out of 10. Carlos was fastest on the first runs of Q3, but he took an aggressive approach for his final lap, which made him lose time and touch the wall. He qualified P4 behind his teammate and the Red Bulls. In the race, Carlos had fallen off Max's tail until a hydraulic problem occurred which made him to retire the car. Overall, Carlos was on pace with his teammate and the Red Bulls, but yet again reliability problems costed him at least a P4 finish. This gives him only 4.5 out of 10 for the race. Here were my full drivers' ratings of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. If you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel.